Can you look at the camera?
What are we like?
And we're back with the Dr. Z Show!
I have not made any silly faces the entire time we've been talking.
Everyone who's ever seen the show before knows that that is a lie. And probably other people that have never seen the show before. They're like, that sounds like something someone who made silly faces the entire time we were talking would say.
I swear, I'm not the villain. That sounds like something.
I swear to drunk, I am not God.
I love that joke.
So anyway, so we're gonna get into the show in just a second, but two things. First thing, so I'm part of a bunch of D&D groups on Facebook because, of course, I'm like part of a bunch of groups now for some reason.
I feel like whenever you are into something, you're in like every conceivable group for it.
Let's take a look at some examples.
Star Wars.
I've
been
into Star Wars though, like forever.
No, but I mean like MTG. I mean the things that you, I don't know, care about. Like you have a variety of interests, but there's like a few things that are like your jam that you follow closely.
Come on.
And when you do follow them, you don't get your information from just like one source. You branch out.
Yeah.
But this is mostly because I only follow like one thing when I'm into something. I only like follow one community on Facebook for it.
That's no fun.
I just don't like notifications.
You have to get your memes from multiple sources. You can also turn off notifications for like everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one of the D&D groups that I'm in, this DM was like, oh, like, what do I do? Like, you know, I have the typical problem with the bard character. Like, he's always trying to seduce NPCs, and, like, his charisma's really high, and he's really lucky, and so he keeps, like... And so, like, he was asking for recommendations, and this guy commented, and he was like, oh, like, I DM, like, my friend's campaigns, and, like, I was, like, running into a similar problem, and then, like, I came up with this idea where, like, they're on their way to fight the big bad at the end of this, like, long stretch, and it was a dragon. And so he was like, oh man, like the bard's gonna try to seduce the dragon, like he's gonna win, and then they're just like gonna win the fight, like whatever. And so he like gets into it and he's like telling the whole story, and so the bard like seduces the dragon and succeeds. And so the whole party's like, oh, like, you know, do we win? Like, what do we get? Like, you know, what's the loot or whatever? And the guy who's the DM, who's like posting this, he's like, no. And he turns to the bard and he's like, roll for damage. And the bard is like, what? And everybody's like, what? And the guy is like, oh, you seduced the dragon. Like, now the dragon wants to have sex with you. Roll for damage. And so, like, the entire party was like, oh god. And apparently it was like bludgeoning damage or something, and like the bard died. So that character that guy like re-rolled a new character, and then he says no one has been a bard in any of his campaigns since. So, pro tip for DMs out there: don't let your players fuck dragons, or do let them fuck dragons. The dragons will just grind them into dust.
Oh man.
I don't remember what the other thing was that I was going to say. I was going to say something else before we started. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, two things.
Yeah, I had two things. Just like in the first episodes of the show or whatever, when you were like, I have 3 things to say. And then we were like, oh, we can't remember the third thing. Guess it's not important. And it was like why we named the show what we did.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, I remember the other thing. Real
Oh,
quick.
okay.
I remember the other thing. So I'm like now caught up, like talking to people, like trying to like generate interest. But also just like talking to people, like people are like, oh, what are you doing later? I'm like, oh, I'm recording the show. Or like, oh, I'm like gonna like people are like, what are you doing now? I'm like, oh, I'm watching the show and like taking notes or whatever. And I run into this thing where I just say the show. Because to me, like, I know what I'm talking about, but people are like, what show are you like? What's the show? And they think like the show is the name of like a television program that I'm watching. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, it's called the Dr. Z Show. It's a podcast or like webcast or whatever like you want to call it.
Vlog.
It's not really a vlog though, because we're not like.
Vlog.
It's not a vlog. Because like
It's a podcast with vlog sub-themes. We did we're chronicling both of our weddings.
it's well, that's true. It's a web show. I would say like it's less podcast because we have the video element now, but it's a web show. We're doing like every week we're doing random shit. Segue.
Wait, quick before sorry to derail your segue, but I feel that because of the nature of because of the nature of our show, because of my slip up last episode, I just wanted to apologize, I don't know, to viewers or whoever needs to be apologized to, of using the term gay as like a pejorative.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because that's
it wasn't cool, man.
Yeah. So, anyways, I felt it was crass, and I'm sorry. And
now you have to apologize for episode 23, where you were a racist.
Oh yeah. You just have that memorized?
Other than Africa. No, I saved that. I bookmarked that episode of the show so that I could turn that into a text tone. And I'm still working on cleaning up the audio.
That makes sense.
But it will, by the time you're here next week for the wedding, it will be your text tone.
Good. Yeah.
I have to keep trimming the end because you start laughing after it.
But anyways, so yes, crazy stuff happening each week. We're gonna talk about Monster of the Week shows.
Mostly tropes.
Media.
I mean, media.
And tropes to a degree. We're not going to list every single one. We can post the TV tropes link in the episode description because that is pretty comprehensive. But for the people who don't know, Monster of the Week is it's like a plot structure in which the characters face a new monster or threat or problem every episode, and it's
so even if you're not a big fucking nerd like Jacob and I are, you've probably seen Scooby-Doo before. It's like that. I think that's like the most basic example of monster, creature, whatever, villain of the week.
Yeah. And one of the issues with Monster of the Week stuff that goes on long enough, most of the time, with the exception of Scooby-Doo, is that eventually there's like overarching plots that are introduced in each season of the show, and eventually those become more and more important to the point where you're spending an entire season dealing with a villain instead of just an episode. And there's people have different feelings about that. Some people like the Monster of the Week thing more. Some people like the overarching plots more because of the character development along the way.
Right, like the characters in Scooby-Doo, like they don't develop. They're just like they're the characters in Scooby-Doo. Like
they're set static character types pretty much the whole time. And I think occasionally Daphne gets violent and is like, I'm not just like a, I don't know. She's not just like a helpless character sometimes.
She was like that in the live action movie. I don't know. I haven't watched like animated Scooby-Doo in a really long time, so.
She was played by Buffy.
Yeah, she's played by Sarah
She
Michelle Gellar.
really.
Yeah,
Oh no! In the live action movie. Yeah. No, I knew that. Okay.
so
I thought you meant that she voiced Sarah Michelle Gellar voiced
Yeah.
Daphne, and I was like, no.
yeah, and Abby added that Fred is her husband in real life.
Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar are married?
Been for a while.
Really? I didn't know that. Mostly because I don't give a shit about celebrity news, but okay.
Well, they're just one of the known examples of a non-failed celebrity couple.
Yet,
Oh,
so far.
just that.
They have a bunch of kids and they seem happy.
Are they a bunch of their own kids, or is it like the Angelina Jolie Brad Pitt thing where they like try to adopt
Their own
children
kids.
from every country?
I'm pretty sure it's their own kids.
Gotta collect them all.
Catch 'em, gotta catch 'em all. Gotta catch 'em all. I couldn't fit in anything.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Oh no.
What did you just think of?
Well, the three syllable.
Anytime you say "oh no" like that, I'm
The
like,
three syllable
thought of something.
phrase. The 3-syllable phrase was foreign kids. Catch. Got it.
Okay, yeah, and the word "catch" makes it sound. Okay,
It does sound very bad.
Okay, I get it now.
Anyways, people aren't Pokemon. Don't throw Pokeballs at them. For those of you who've been thinking about it, we know who you are.
Let's be honest, Jacob. The only person that's been thinking about it is you.
I'm sorry. My brain covers a lot of potential reality, and it's scary. That's a weird way to say it.
Jacob's
Let's move
entire
on.
life is actually written by the DC universe, so there's always parallel realities going on.
Yeah. Oh, actually, speaking of comic books, though, so comic books, the early days of comics were very,
Action comics.
yeah, they were very much so a monster of the week type things. Although there were, recurring characters, they would encounter new villains, most of the time, and then sometimes you just get new heroes entirely with new villains. And then as time has gone on, most villains and everything have become canonical and have become rogues galleries for most of the heroes, and so it's more
If you don't know what Rogues Gallery is, I'm realizing we have to
yeah.
For people that aren't into this kind of nerd topic, we should explain a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Rogues Gallery is
Wait,
bad.
Abby wants to explain rogues
Okay,
gallery.
go ahead.
There's multiple villains who say, "This isn't over, superhero name. I'll be back," and then they do come back.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
They can
sure,
different. Even winning, they don't die.
true. Let's take a look at some examples. So, Batman's Rogues Gallery is the Joker, the Riddler, Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, recurring villains.
Calendar Man, Abby chimed in,
Calendar Man?
He exists.
and he hasn't been killed by Batman, so
Batman has a really crappy B-list.
Who do you think has the worst Rogues Gallery? The most boring
Captain Planet.
list of villains. He's only got 3 people.
That's why.
In the show.
Right.
Now he's now it's everyone. You've probably not seen the picture, but I encourage you to look it up in your spare time. The picture of Greta Thunberg as Captain Planet. Quality internet.
I will. I'll look it up at some point, but that's very good. She needs. Wait, was she summoned?
Yeah, that's where like the joke sort of falls apart.
Yeah. She's definitely a real person.
Can't believe Tom Cruise was the original voice of Captain Planet. Yeah, in the pilot, you didn't know this. In the pilot episode, Captain Planet was voiced by Tom Cruise.
Because he
It
was
was like,
Top
this
Gun
is stupid.
pilot episodes. I'm gonna shoehorn that joke everywhere. Now that I know it's possible.
That's the second time you've made that joke in the past 2 hours.
All shows about planes are pilot episodes. Every episode's a pilot episode.
Not if it's about a plane.
Wait,
While Jacob is looking this up, I'll take this opportunity to promote next week will be wedding featurettes, and we'll of course compile them all into one big episode. But the first episode of the wedding featurettes will be when Jacob and Abby arrive at the airport, and I punch Jacob in the throat.
How many times?
Brenna only has
Ouch.
17 written down, but
that was for that episode.
yeah, that was for that day. So
You should wear your throat punching shirt.
That's
oh
true.
yeah, no. Like of course, Throw Punch University.
Wow.
Uh,
So
you
yeah,
agree?
so Tom Cruise was the he was the voice actor for 6 episodes, and then after that it was David Coburn for 113 episodes.
Jesus Christ, that show went on for 121 episodes?
Yep.
I didn't know there were that like many kinds of eco-terrorism.
And Whoopi Goldberg was the voice of Gaia.
What? No, I knew that actually.
That's cool.
No, I knew that. I apologize for my loud keyboard, but I don't apologize.
Yeah, there were 6 seasons of Captain Planet.
6 seasons?
Yeah, and every
And
single
Cowboy Bebop only had 1 season? What the fuck? What? It's not related, but what? I'm disappointed.
I'm not mad at Cowboy Bebop. I just saw this really gross ad for a show called Lock and Key, and I did not like it.
You did not like it, Samwise.
I did not. Samwise Gamgee.
Stop.
Those hobbits always trying to get me to eat breakfast.
Twice.
Okay. So,
Monster of the week.
that's so yeah. Comic books is one example where you have over time it has become not monster of the week. It's more like the villains still have different plots that they introduce and try to, whatever to kill
over the
the
city.
good guy. But it's not a different monster. It's not a different it's not a new character. It's like same character, new idea for how to kill. Like we killed the Batman.
Right.
But the other thing is it does get to, I don't remember if I said this on air, but it gets to a point where it's taking a longer amount of time to deal with each problem, rather than having just a new problem that's dealt with in that issue of the comic or episode of the show. And that happens in like superhero TV shows as well. Smallville's one example. I think Static Shock still does a good job of keeping it to a Monster of the Week kind of plot. Although
Yeah. So Smallville was like monster of the week for the first few seasons, while they were still sort of feeling their way out to how popular the show was going to be.
Mhm.
And then they had Lex Luthor was prevalent the entire run of the show, but it sort of became like, okay, he's like using his powers more. Like now he's like, you know, like he's got these villains now from like the I want to say the negative zone, the Phantom Zone, and like now Bizarro shows up, and like these recurring like Superman villains like start popping up,
Mhm.
and it moves away from like the monster of the week to more like ongoing villains. I think around season 6 is when it like really picks up with like plots that don't get resolved immediately, like they're ongoing.
There's also
Um,
Justice League is introduced at some point.
yeah, I think that's in season 6. Like the Flash is introduced, and Oliver Queen is
Right.
introduced. Martian Manhunter shows up, but he's not like a member of the Justice League. He's like he shows up like hunting Supergirl or something.
Hmm.
And it's been a really long time since I watched Smallville.
I do know that Dr. Fate.
Just to follow it. It was one of the shows that I watched. I was like, oh man, Smallville's on this week. Like, gotta watch Smallville.
Yeah. I haven't watched all of it.
There's a lot of, I mean, like you could skip the first 6 seasons and like just go to the like when the good stuff starts happening.
I know.
And there's like big plot events, like his father dies, and like there's big plot events in the first 6 seasons. Like one of the main characters like leaves the show.
Is that Lana Lang?
She dies and then like marries Lex Luthor, or she like marries Lex Luthor, and then she like comes back, and then she like dies, but it was like a clone, and then she like runs away. The Lana Lang stuff is weird.
So what you're saying is she was Mary Jane from the 90s Spider-Man animated series.
That's not what I'm saying, but yes. Well, and it's interesting because, funnily enough, she's like eventually written off the show, but so was one of the main from the first couple of seasons, Pete Ross, who was like canonically one of Superman's like friends, like when Clark is like still in high school or whatever.
Mm.
And he's like one of the first people who like finds out that Clark Kent is Superman, because like Clark like tells him, it's like, oh, like I'm an alien.
Oh yeah.
And in the comics, in like the canonical like Superman, Pete marries Lana Lang. They like get married and like, you know, have their own life or whatever. But Lois is introduced, and she's like the cousin of one of the like original one of like the original like friend group, I guess you will, of Clark's from high school. And like then all sorts of weird shit happens.
Also something.
Sorry, I went way off on like a Smallville tangent right there, but
something I also realized is perhaps not everyone knows the term syndicated, which I've used a few times. So something that's like syndicated is it's just kind of another word for like episodic, or you know, something that's released not all at once. So like a movie, if a movie was released in parts instead of just the entire movie all at once, it would be, you know, like syndicated. And that was how like a lot of books were in the early, in like what 1800s, when people started writing for money, is they would write part of their book and send it out in like newspapers, you know, for whatever, for people to buy, and then they would write the next part, and now we can just buy the book
complete.
And I don't know if that's where like the idea of anyways, I don't know where the idea of like chapters comes into that. I assume that chapters for those older books is that like just whatever was released, like it's however many chapters long, is like however many times it was released for that story.
Yeah, nowadays chapter is like the definitive like end of, like if you think about it like I think about it like this, like so like a play, right, has like scenes,
An axe.
an axe. So like each like scene when like the lights go out and they're like moving set pieces on stage or whatever like is happening, like other characters are coming out or whatever. That to me is like a chapter.
Okay.
Like that's what a chapter would be. Is like, oh, the scene's over. Like now this other scene is happening.
Yeah.
And usually that's how books are structured. Like especially books like Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones books. Like each
Yeah.
chapter focuses on a different character because there's like a million characters and he's trying to tell all the stories at once because he thinks he's Tolkien. I mean, that's what happens.
The R, he doesn't actually even have an R. Like the initials, they aren't even in his name. He just added them. He was like, oh, if I want to be like Tolkien, I have to have the RR.
That's not actually why, but sure. It makes sense with my analogy. Anyway, so yeah, that's how I think about chapters. Like,
Yeah. On an unrelated, semi-related note, I was just thinking about how weird it would be if you went to go. So we're so used to like episodes of TV shows now, but going back to the chapter or episode kind of analogy for a play, could you imagine like going to go see a play and you see like 30 minutes of it and they're like, okay, like come back next week
Come
and we'll
back
have the
next
next
week.
30 minutes.
Okay.
Plays would be less watched than they are now.
Time for some
Or
drama
would they?
nerd things.
Abby has drama nerd facts.
So, technically, the episodic format that we know from TV with, it has some, like, basis in, oh gosh, what are they? Religious passion plays, which were plays that would portray, like, a story of the Bible.
Hmm.
And so they did
What about all
have,
the B stories of
like-
the Bible, though?
Hmm?
What about the B stories of the Bible?
they would have a lot of the B stories because the B stories are the ones where you can make more jokes and be less reverent.
Yeah, like all the stuff in the Old Testament. Well, not all of it,
And
but
they would put a bunch of weird stuff in there that was not in there. They liked to sex them up a bunch. I mean,
I want everyone to stop for a moment and think, like, that someone somewhere was the original person to come up with the idea of, like, let's sex up the stories in the Bible. And then, like, people just went along with it. Like, other people were like, wow, that guy had a really great idea. Let's do it.
well, they were illiterate back then, and they wanted to teach the Bible stories, but then they also wanted to, get paid and get attention.
get paid.
So they would add a bunch of weird, wacky side characters who are just terrible.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think that covers the terminology we've been using.
So far, yeah. I
Yeah.
think so.
Okay. I don't know. Are there? So something you had talked about before was whether or not it's lazy writing to have the same plot structure in every episode, or
Yeah, so let me like sort of dive into that. I know we were talking about this off air, and like we definitely should have recorded that conversation somehow. Like we had that conversation too early.
contact a personal FBI agent. He'll have it for us.
Yeah,
Just a random file appears on your computer.
Sean or something. Anyway, no, but
Here you go.
it's like you
Thanks
need
for
to get
thinking
this.
of me.
So on the one hand, it feels like lazy writing. Like Scooby-Doo feels like it's the laziest written show that has ever existed. Because, like, the entire show is structured the same. Like, you could take the villain and the scene and completely interchange it with anything else. Like, there's a big mystery. The gang shows up. They split up and look for clues. They find some clues. The monster finds them. The monster chases them. They get away. They set up a trap. The trap fails, but then it succeeds in the way it wasn't supposed to succeed. And then they unmask the villain, and it was actually the mean old man that they met in the beginning.
Or someone who had a motive. Like, not just like someone who was like, I was trying to scare people off so that I could own this property.
I think every single time it's somebody that they've run into.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised if it's somebody that like they didn't interact with.
Yeah, I think it's either
Episode.
it has to be someone that they've run into or some. I mean, I haven't watched enough Scooby-Doo to say for sure, but someone that has at least been heavily mentioned throughout the episode, like, oh, like the land contractor has been, calling us a bunch, whatever, or something, or like we keep, I don't know. I feel like it's always people that want houses, or like they know about gold on the property, or whatever. They're just like always trying to scare people away from areas so that they can get money.
Yeah, it's mostly money motivated because that's like, well, and here's the thing, that's like a very easy thing to explain to kids. Is like greed is bad. Like these people are greedy and that makes them evil. Like, and then those kids grow up to be Republicans. Anyway, so
or the bad kids learn, wait a second, I can steal things from my from my friends and family if I scare them away from their belongings. This is a great idea.
That seems like extra steps. So on the one hand, it feels like lazy writing, but on the other hand, it's like a huge room for a huge room. It's a huge space for like creativity.
Space.
And the creativity thing, like less so with Scooby-Doo because the animation is like kind of clunky and like, it's older, so it's like not great. I think more creatively in like things like Power Rangers. So like in the Power Rangers episode, like there's always some like whatever like bullshit going on and like between the teenagers, and then like the monster shows up and they don't morph into the Power Rangers, and the monster like kicks their ass, and then they're like, all right, like now we're gonna morph, and then they beat the shit out of the monster, and whoever the like seasonal villain is like, oh no, and like powers up his monster, and then they have to call the Zords, and then it like turns into Megazord, and it takes 7 centuries, where the monster could have just like crushed them. But he's like, okay, I'll wait for you, like, to, like, assemble your Megazord, whatever. And then they get in the Megazord, and they fight the monster, and it explodes in a shower of sparks, or whatever. But the monsters are always, like, dumb but interesting looking.
And they have
There's always, like, some
powers.
crazy... Yeah, they always have different powers, and sometimes their powers are stupid, but, like, there's always, like, some crazy, like, art going on with, like, their costume design.
Yeah.
And so like, it leaves, like, that... It's not, like, creative... like in the writing sense of creative, but it's creative in like just the general artistic sense of like we can create something flashy and interesting to look at.
Yeah, so
until we look it up later in the episode.
The other people involved in the production have a lot of design space to work with for making new costumes and everything, whereas other shows or whatever, it's gonna like you're just like, okay, like this character wears the same clothes every episode, like we gotta, like, that's part of who they are, so they gotta wear it. The other thing I was thinking of with Power Rangers is just some of the weirder powers that some of the villains have had. Like there was one villain, I don't know in what season, but it had the power to steal people's souls by taking pictures of them.
It was in Turbo. It was in season 2 of Turbo. Don't ask me why I know that. But it was in season 2 of Turbo. I don't remember what he was called. I don't remember his name.
Yeah. And
they always had like the dumbest that had to do with their powers. Pictographer Man or something like that. They always had stupid names.
Yeah. Still one of my favorite villains though is the pizza one. Who just wanted to bake them into a giant pizza. Because he almost, like, he was very close to killing them. Like, other villains had, fought them or whatever, but they were never, like, on the verge of murdering them right then and there.
in the second.
Yeah.
Except
So-
the Psycho Rangers
Oh, yeah, the
from
Psycho. yeah.
from In Space. From Power Rangers in Space.
They come back in Galaxy, I think. But anyways, this is an episode about Power Rangers.
We could devote an entire episode to Power Rangers. I was gonna say, right before you tried to change the subject, I was gonna say to tell your story about your favorite Power Rangers villain, the guy who
Oh,
how that worked out in was it Time Force or
oh,
no?
yeah. Okay, well, two things. So one of their just like Monster of the Week villains, not one of like the overarching ones. He was just really fast, and so they addressed the fact that it takes time for them to morph, and so he would just attack them while they were morphing and prevent.
Oh
them.
wow, okay, that's never happened before.
It was. I mean, granted, I haven't watched all of Power Rangers to know if it ever happens again like that. I know there's other things that have interfered with them morphing, like sometimes it's weird, like personal journey stuff. Other times,
In the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, I really want to put this in there to interrupt you. In the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, they're fighting Ivan Ooze's Ooze minions or whatever, and so they're like backed up against this cliff, and the minions are like closing in, and they're like, all right, like it's gonna it's morphin time, and they all morph, and it takes 7 centuries, and then they're done morphing, and they look around, and all the minions have escaped. They're like, oh no, now we have to go into this dark, scary building to find them. Like, why does that never happen before? Like, you could just leave. Or like I said before, the villain, the giant villain that's waiting for them to call the Zords could just step on them.
yeah.
Problem solved.
Also,
Anyway.
the villains really should just lead with that, right? I mean,
turn into the giant
this.
Well,
this
it's like I say about Samurai Jack and Aku. Samurai Jack's about to defeat Aku in their first battle, and Aku's like, "Oh no!" and throws him into the future. Just open with that attack. It's your strongest attack. Just open with it. The Samurai Jack shows up and he's like, "I'm here to defeat you," and be like, "Nah!" Just throw him into the future where you're already all powerful.
It was his last spell slot.
It was terrible game design because he had to use up all the other spell slots before he could use that one.
Yeah. Poor game design on the part of the writers of Samurai Jack.
The television show.
That would be actually Samurai Jack would be a sweet D&D campaign, but anyway.
You'd have to have him be mute most of the time, though. All your characters would have to be mute most of the time.
It'd be a cool setting for a D&D campaign.
Samurai Jack, in the future, or Samurai Jack, in the past?
In the future.
Okay.
Because there's all the robots and in addition to I don't know.
Well, it's because he has a magic sword. That's how he can slice through everything, because it was given to him by a god or somebody.
Yeah. Oh, but one of my favorite.
That's a Monster of the Week show.
Yes.
Samurai Jack. Aku is the villain, but there's always new people trying to fuck him up.
Yeah. Yeah, just constant. Well, because they're all being hired by Aku to kill him most of the time. A few of them fight him just because they want to, but a lot of times they're. Also.
Because there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, because he doesn't talk. Well, I mean, he does talk, but he's a man of few words.
Well, the Scotsman was a villain for a little bit very early in season 1, I think. Even
and comes his friend.
Yeah, and then they're best friends.
Also, speaking of Samurai, a really good episode just in terms of visual artwork is the one where he fights. Yeah, the ninja
That's
fight.
from season. That's season 6, isn't it? That's the new season, or is it earlier than that?
I think it's an older one.
Okay. Yeah, if you're really into excellent usage of lighting and visual design, look up Samurai Jack fights ninja. You'll know what episode we're talking about when you find it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
The visual design is amazing.
Oh, anyways, one of my I think I've probably talked about this on the show before, but one of my favorite Power Rangers overall villains is this one who like it's in Time Force, so there's time travel involved. He's basically he just in the future there's been a lot of like pollution and like other like developments with technology and stuff, and so a bunch of people have become mutated, kind of like the mutagen in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, except for not like turning them into animals, but just giving them weird deformities and powers and stuff. And so he's basically just kind of like not an eco-terrorist, but he's like a terrorist who's fighting for the rights of people who are like abused in society. And he goes to the past to try and like wreak havoc before the heroes can do anything about it. And they follow him into the Power Rangers from the future, follow him into the past. And but that season ends with, and like his daughter's with him, because the villains almost always have a lieutenant. Like there's always like the main villain, a lieutenant, and then a scientist who is sort of inept. In every season of Power Rangers, like there's always like that cast for the villain people. But his lieutenant is his daughter, and she has kind of like character development over the course of the whole season, where eventually she's like, we're hurting innocent and this is wrong, because she there's some like fight going on, and she sees a mother like running away with her baby, and she does something to protect the baby, and then during the final fight between the Rangers and her dad, she shows up and is like, just tells him that like we can't keep doing this. And he kind of looks at her and he's like, and he just surrenders. So
that seems weird. Like that seems like, I don't know. You told me about it, and I was like, "What the heck?" Like that seems like a very like.
It can seem, I don't know, anticlimactic, but it was.
It feels super anticlimactic, even like talking about it. It's like what?
Yeah. But considering just how many villains they have just killed in the end, like.
Oh yeah, that just like explode or whatever.
Or get turned at the end of. In space they blow up something that's like the source of all evil in the universe, and it sends this wave out that.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they blow up this thing.
Oh, in space. Okay, you said in space, and my mind immediately went to Lost Galaxy, and I was like, that doesn't happen. Sorry.
Oh yeah, they blow up a thing, and it turns all the villains like into human good versions of themselves, because the evil is wiped from their hearts or whatever. But
use the power of friendship to kill God.
Not quite. To kill the evil.
To kill evil
that lurks in men's hearts.
Sure, because that always goes.
Humans were the real monster all along.
Well, it's like our friend Ian's like thing about anime. Like anytime there's a character in anime that says he wants to remake the world, he's the villain. Like that character is the main villain.
It's true in Naruto, at least.
It's true in a lot of animes. Animes.
Yeah. Animes? An animated maze.
What?
Abby said anime-anays.
Ugh.
I was imagining, those like little things of jam had back when the like original Pokemon series was really popular, and they had those cups. Anyways,
wait, you said jam?
Yeah, so it was like grape jelly, but my family just cleaned them out, and so we just have these cups that have Pokemon on them.
I thought you said your family just cleaned them out, and I was like, you bought all of them? I was like, what?
That's what I thought as well.
I wish. That'd be dope. Anyways, we're losing steam.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about Buffy.
Okay, so so the reason we're actually talking about this subject is because I've been watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer because
Nerd.
it's Abby's favorite series. So
I'll get around to it eventually. I'll get around to it. I'll start watching it when you start watching Cowboy Bebop, and I'll bet I'll be finished before you.
no,
You're just like, no.
unless you watch it at like I don't know 20 times speed and like just skip.
Have a vague idea of what's going on at all times.
But Buffy's really good because it has the monster. It does do the thing a bit where there's kind of that dial I was talking about before, where it goes from being Monster of the Week themed to being a little more villain of the season themed over time. But it maintains a good like power scaling for the character and character development for all of the characters. They're still themselves, the characters don't develop in ways that makes them like unrecognizable, and they don't like cease to fill the roles that they fill in the core cast, but they have meaningful development as characters over the course of the show. Anyways, this is a good show. Like, there are episodes there are still monster episodes, but there's almost always something happening in that episode that is furthering the plot of the season as well. Shows that I don't know, have tried to do that. Like Supernatural, it's too long. And so it has become one. Well, I mean, I don't know. Going back to kind of thinking about comic books, what is why is Supernatural going so long? Is it bad because it employs real people?
Is it bad because it's what?
So something I was thinking about with comic books, you get new writers. They're still handling the same characters and everything.
In comic books, they get to go back and do the best stories over again.
Best, but yeah, right, yeah.
So
well, they get to, whether or not they do.
Yeah, like re-releases of things. But Supernatural for as live action Monster of the Week shows, there's past a certain point, because you've established that there is going to be a big bad for the entire season, that becomes, it's just like dealing with each problem just takes longer and longer and longer. And I think that's...
And then it's just two 40-year-old men constantly saving each other from hell.
Did you hear Abby?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But I think that's the issue, is mostly in... I think the issue lies in power scaling to a degree. Is like because I've heard people talk about, and I can't think of any specific examples, I wish I could, but I've heard people talk about how they like the episodic things more than the overarching plots more. Something I was just thinking about also was like that's Monster of the Week by nature, because they travel to a new space and time every episode. Yeah. So I think Buffy does a good job of it. Supernatural is good to a certain point, but then I think it's just has gone so long that it takes too long to deal with each problem. And I guess comic books, the reason that they do well is that they have kind of like a set number of issues when they introduce a new arc that they decide we're going to finish this arc in this amount of time or like in this amount of issues instead of just being like
Okay.
spinning their wheels over and over again of like, oh, we don't know how to deal with it, like this villain will never deal with it.
And that's like sort of a recurrent trope within the trope of Monster of the Week is that like there are in a lot of like in anime especially, but even in TV shows where there's like the overarching like the big bad, there's like episodes of Monster of the Week. And sometimes that feels like they're just spinning their wheels like about like like some stuff's happening in the background with like the villain like preparing, but then there's like this like whatever random monster that they have to fight because of reasons.
Yeah. I was also thinking about how just in terms of storytelling, you have to have there has to be resolution at some point, or meaningful conflict. Like
Patch,
so,
you're okay.
Just my complaints about Supernatural because I have watched 9 seasons of it, but the internal conflict between the internal conflict between Sam and Dean over I feel could have been taken care of in a few key episodes instead of reintroducing it every time. You're my brother and you made a decision I didn't like. Well, you make decisions I don't like. Now we'll see each other's lives and then it's over.
Literally the entire second half of the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie and the entire first half of the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Is that why they were bad?
No, there are multiple reasons for that, but that's what that reminds me of. Is like Will and what's her name in that movie? Orlando Bloom plays like Will Turner or whatever. Elizabeth something, whatever. But Will like spend all this time being like angry at each other because they don't like tell each other everything that's going on or whatever, and it's just like it's super unnecessary, but they introduced it as like kind of like a subplot like piece of garbage. And it's like, okay, why does this exist? Like, why is this happening? This has nothing to do with pirates or like anything. Or Johnny Depp being Captain Jack Sparrow. Like, it has nothing to do with that.
Or maybe it did. Who knows? Maybe Johnny Depp, like, I'm only going to be Captain Jack Sparrow if you add this subplot. I'll only sign the contract if you have them fight. I don't know. Weird things.
Anyway.
Wait, what was I thinking about Supernatural? Teen Wolf is Swiss cheese. It's very tasty, but there's lots of holes.
It also rips off Buffy.
Yeah.
See, going back to what you were talking about with SWAT cats, you saying that the show Teen Wolf is very tasty does not help your standing as a potential furry. Does not like that only increases the furry probability meter higher.
Well, they're not furries, they're werewolves. It's very different.
It's still going
up. I mean the overall flavor of the show.
Is Swiss cheese?
It's Swiss cheese.
You could bake them into a quiche. It would be wonderful.
Oh no. That'd be a very gross quiche. Made out of the entire cast.
You gotta get the bacon from somewhere. I don't know where I'm going with this, but whatever.
Tired. That's what.
let's
Yeah, I don't mean that in like a derogatory friend. You look tired, the kind of thing. I just mean it's late. So, Teen Wolf. So speaking of like conflict, where characters are like, "Oh, you never tell me anything." I there are moments in the show where it's rewarding. All come together and agree on a plan. I think most of the time it's just kind of contrived why they haven't talked to each other yet. There are some moments when people aren't talking to each other because they're like mad at each other, but those are usually resolved. And it doesn't. I can't remember exactly, but I don't think it happens between the same two characters, more than once to a point where it becomes stale. There's like a really good moment between the main character Scott McCall and Styles, his best friend, in season 5, where like they get in this big fight over kind of like the morality of things, of whether or not they should save or kill villains, and
So what is this, BioShock?
No, it's 5 seasons, not 1 game. Or 3 games, I guess. But anyways, so I think it's those conflicts where people aren't talking to each other or need to resolve issues between themselves when they have conflicts of opinion or interest or just their entire like viewpoint on life and the things they're dealing with. Those are fine to have, but if you have the exact same problem. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why Scooby-Doo is like a fine show, in that even though the plot is the same, there's a different villain each time. It's not them running into the same guy pretending to be a monster in every single city.
Right, because that guy like goes to jail for like being weird.
Yeah.
Or trespassing, or like very minor offenses.
Yeah. So, yeah, like if the and I don't know, I think there's a little bit of stale writing in Dragon Ball Z, in that like the problem, I guess if the problem is, well, not necessarily solved the same way, but if the character's development to solve the problem is the same every time, maybe that's stale. Like
in Dragon Ball Z?
Yeah, so Goku's solution to everything stronger. It's not like improve in any other way other than just be stronger. So like in Buffy, as a counterpoint, there's problems that they face where the strength isn't just Buffy being like, I'm gonna be stronger and that's how I'm gonna win this time. Like that happens at the end of season 1. Like she just kind of gets over herself to a degree and is not afraid of fighting the main villain anymore and doesn't hold back, and that's how she wins. But in other seasons, that's not how she solves the problems. Like, it's
she develops as a character.
Yeah, it's through like working with her friends and finding out,
using the power of friendship to kill vampires.
Yes. Well, I mean, she can kill vampires on her own.
Well, actually, the villain of season 5 is a god.
A god?
God.
Does she kill him?
Her.
Does she kill her?
I mean, I haven't finished it yet, but or at least banishes her to whatever dimension she came from. So.
Use the power of friendship to banish God. We got there. Teamwork makes the dream work. Bleach also does that. Like, Bleach becomes like story arc focused, but there's always like the villain is always like about to kill him, and then he like unlocks the power within himself.
Yeah.
That he didn't know existed to defeat the villain, and it's like then he just becomes like the Superman kind of hero, where he's just like, I'm suddenly more powerful than this particular class of villain.
Yeah.
That will fight me.
This doesn't hold true for all of the arcs of Naruto, but because there is a strong
There's just,
theme.
like, a million of them, but
There's a strong theme of, you know, improving and training and everything, but the
it's become the
entire
next Hokage.
the entire cast of characters does that. So it's not just like
It's
It's
not
not,
just
like-
about the main character.
yeah. Whereas I mean, admittedly in Dragon Ball, the other characters do become stronger, but the
Except
different-
Yamcha and Krillin, because they suck.
No, Krillin actually is like really strong. Like because the thing is he's just a human, like compared to everyone
Oh,
else.
well, yeah. Okay.
And he does end up going toe to toe with like other things later on that are just stronger. But Yamcha sucks. It- um, and they'll show improvements, but just the distance between them and Goku just increases like crazy.
Because he
um,
just becomes ridiculous, like strong.
Yeah. And admittedly, that does happen with Naruto and Sasuke. Like they outscale everyone in the end, but there's still it. Well, I guess the thing I like about Naruto is that it's not just it's not just like inherent strength. It's your like skill and the people using the different types of powers against each other. And strategizing, you know, and not just like we'll punch him harder this time. So,
True.
but I don't know. So I guess most Monster of the Week things, there's usually a cast of characters. The good ones, I don't know. Maybe in summary, I guess this is our last thoughts part. But the good ones have actual character development. Or they just stick to their thing, to the Monster of the Week formula, like Scooby-Doo. You know, I'm not super.
Yeah,
into
well, I was
Scooby-
gonna say like you like Megas XLR, but like do the characters change? Like do they become
Yeah.
different?
Yeah, they do develop because the main two characters in that, Jamie and shoot, what is his?
The
He looks
other
like- he looks like Guy Fieri.
Yeah.
What is his name? Coop.
I don't know.
Oh, that's his name. Coop.
Coop?
So,
Like chicken coop?
uh,
Your car.
yeah, COOP. But I guess it's spelled the same for both of those, right?
No, coop like a coupe car is COUPE.
Also a military coup.
That's without the E.
Or co-op. Maybe his name's co-op, and everyone's just been mispronouncing it this whole time.
Co-op has a
Yeah. it has-
dash in it.
Okay, so Coop and Jamie, they're really selfish at the beginning of the series because they're just like they
We
build
have a
this.
giant robot.
Yeah, they're like, we have a giant robot and we're gonna trick it out with like our cool video game stuff, and you know this will be nerdy and fun. But then they become more selfless over the course of the series. You know, they're still zany, but they're not as afraid of fighting things, and they're more willing to sacrifice to meet I don't know, worthy goals. So
Okay.
Bad ones. As far as the series that have, I don't know, characters where there's growth, where they have episodes where it seems like the characters grow or change, where they address like, oh, like I'm different now, but then the characters make the exact same decisions or exact same mistakes throughout the series. I'm looking at you, Supernatural. I think that's bad. Just I don't know, writing.
Well, okay, hold on. So I'm gonna sort of like bury ourselves into this hole that we're gonna have to dig out of. So, Teen Titans.
Okay.
They have the Rogues Gallery of like the Brotherhood of Evil and like their Slade, but mostly they're fighting like Monster of the Week type villains,
That are
right?
sent by the main villains.
Okay, sure. over the course of the series, Teen Titans, do the Titans change? Ah.
My gut instinct is no, but there's episodes where they address I don't know, important aspects of their characters. So, but I think
See,
overall,
I would say no, because in those episodes, the characters, like in the episodes that aren't like about Brother Blood or like Robin and Slade, like, you know, whatever, they're, you know, they're separate like villains that they fight. And even in those episodes, like there's aspects of the character that are addressed, but then it doesn't, like, they never like reference it. They never, it's never shown like, oh, like, you know, Cyborg like fought Brother Blood and learned this like valuable lesson that now he will incorporate like in the future. Like there's the bit about Robin like being Red X, and then like the guy steals the Red X uniform, and they like reference like, oh wait, you're not Red X, like now it's this other guy. So that's like kind of a recurring villain thing, but point, like they don't, the characters don't evolve. But we're both in agreement, and everyone who's like ever seen Teen Titans and like isn't a moron is in agreement that Teen Titans is fucking fantastic as you know, as it is.
oh wait, no, I think the reason it's so good is that the development happens over. I read a thing that each season focused on a different Titan, and so that's why it doesn't feel stale. Because the development takes a while.
Like, yeah, there's like the Brother Blood bit with, well, there's like, I think Slade is the first one. I think Robin and Slade is the first one.
Robin and Slade, and then Robin, he doesn't like go behind the backs of everyone later on. Like,
yeah, in the beginning, it's very like, oh, this is my fight, like, you know, it's about me or whatever. And then there's the Brotherhood of Evil with Cyborg and Brother Blood, where he like goes to become the leader of Titans East, and then they're like being controlled or whatever. And he like joins the Brotherhood to like get access to fight this guy.
Yeah.
And then
he goes undercover.
Well, see, and then there's the Raven and Trigon bit, which is like, I think that's much later. That's like season 4 or 5. Who does Beast Boy? Who is his like main antagonist?
There's Terra, and then there's the Dune Patrol.
Well, Terra's Doom Patrol. Terra's not an antagonist though. She's played differently than like the typical like Slade. He's evil, like he's trying to kill Robin. Or like he's trying to, you know, teach Robin and then he's trying to kill him. Or Brother Blood, who's like trying to control Cyborg because Cyborg's really powerful. Or Trigon, who's like a demon. It's like, you know, Raven's his daughter. And so that's why I don't really agree with that. The Doom Patrol sort of worked like Titans East, where Beast Boy was like, oh, maybe I will leave the Titans to like go back to the Doom Patrol, because in the beginning when he's introduced in like the pilot episode, he was like a member of the Doom Patrol, and he was like, oh, Robin, like, oh, you're my hero, and like he joins the Titans. Starfire doesn't really have an antagonist. There's Blackfire, but that's over the course of like 2 episodes.
That's true. Yeah, it's
just like just taken care of. Because they go to
her planet, whatever.
She's always naming it. I'm trying to remember what it's called.
Not Thanagar.
Thanagar or something else.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So they go back to her planet, and then Robin is like, can't tell her he loves her, and then they're like, oh wait, Blackfire's evil, and so they fight her and they win. Well,
and there's a few more episodes where she has to develop stuff, like she fights that thing that like rocks all the rest of the Titans, and she develops her laser eyes. There's that like big pink and white like mantis thing that like wraps up all the other Titans.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then
Laser beams from her eyes.
what else does she have to do? I think it's more there's more like episodes about Starfire instead of a season. Because there's like the episode there's the episode where she has
she goes to the future.
Yeah.
And she meets future Robin as Nightwing.
Yeah. And the cool episode where and like all the Titans are like trashed and what's his name?
Cyborg is plugged into Titan's tower. Raven is I don't think Raven's even in that episode.
No, Raven is, and she's just in a white room by herself, like just trapped in her own head because she's so alone. Like,
and then Beast Boy is like fat. He's like in a cage. It's like a side attraction or whatever.
Yeah.
Robin's the only one that is like cool. Like, he's Nightwing. It's like I'm gonna fuck up everyone's shit. Nightwing.
And there's the episode where her and Raven switch bodies because they fight that like puppet master person.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of episodes like about Starfire without her having like a crazy main villain that they fight for an entire season.
Yeah. So I do wonder like what. Now I'm kind of wondering what counts as character development in shows where you're trying to maintain the core for those characters, like because I don't know, it can't just be power scaling. Like it has to be their own maturity.
It has to change something about how they approach problems or relationships.
I think the easiest way to like define character development in like cartoons, like let's be honest, cartoons, is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
And Steven Universe is also good.
Well, yeah,
but Avatar.
I would argue that's like that's more of like a cult following. Avatar is huge, and like if you haven't watched Avatar, you at least like know that it exists on some like basic level of your brain. Like as a nerd or as someone who has ever been around nerds. Like, because the character development in Avatar is crazy. Like, holy shit, it's so good.
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, I've avoided saying that for a few episodes, but it comes back.
With a vengeance. Oh, man.
It does not die hard, though.
That was an okay movie.
That was terrible.
I saw it at midnight.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, I went with my dad and Alex, our DM.
Cool. Fun. That was the fourth. Was like Timothy Olyphant the villain in that one or something?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a different one?
I just know that the plot was about them shutting down American infrastructure.
Yeah, Timothy Olyphant was the villain one. Anyway, not the point. Do we have any actual final thoughts? That was like kind of a final thought that went on a while.
I am wondering. That's like the question that I want to answer. I don't know. I would have to do like a psych profile of every character at the beginning of a series, and then a psych profile on them at the end of a series, and see, like, because Sokka, yeah, like everyone in Avatar definitely develops. Everyone in Buffy definitely develops, because like.
But and see the good thing about like both Buffy and Avatar, and the thing that I want to like sort of like pinpoint here is, yeah, their character develops and changes and like becomes crazy, like powerful, or you know whatever, like they change, but they still keep that thing that makes them them, right? Like they still keep that like key, like I don't want to say quirk because that feels like I'm like trivializing it, but they keep that key like piece of their identity that's like this character is definitely Sokka, like this character is definitely Buffy, like this character is definitely Aang, like
Something I was thinking about is uh well like the well written of a lot of characters into villainy is based around that thing of an event happens in their life that fundamentally changes who they are, and they are almost unrecognizable from the person they were in the past. So like heroes maintain their it seems like they maintain their identity while maturing, whereas villains like there's some kind of trauma and then they're like, oh, now I have to remake the world in my image. like I
okay, yeah, no, that's a really good point actually.
So although there's probably poorly written villains who have that kind of motivation and development, but I think that's just villains who are related. I don't know. I'm thinking of like Eric Killmonger in Black Panther, like his
father dying.
Yeah, him, and so the I don't know School of Hard Knocks, leads him to the conclusion that, well, there's all this technology. I'm just gonna brute force solve all of the problems that I like.
Right, like I'm gonna solve all the problems by killing people.
Yeah. So.
Great plan.
But anyways, yeah. Now I'm. I don't know. I already was analyzing shows, but now I think I might be more well equipped to. I don't know.
Think about
Yeah.
the characters themselves over the
Yeah,
course
from
of
the
like a
beginning to
longer
end.
period of time.
Yeah, because a lot of times when you're I don't know hooked on a show, that it's sometimes they're so long that it's hard to tell.
Mhm.
So, but I don't know, maybe Avatar was just short enough that it was easy to tell, like easier to tell. It was only 3 seasons, so if Avatar had gone on for like 6 seasons, 7, 8, 9, 10, if there had been 10 seasons of Avatar, would we have known? Like, could they have maintained good character growth? I don't think so. I mean, maybe.
Well, because I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but there's nothing like there's like traumatic events, like Sokka's like girlfriend turns into the moon, and it's rough. And like there's like traumatic events for each character, but that's not what changes them. Like that, it affects them, but it's not what changes them and makes them better.
Mm-hmm. It's I don't know their reaction to it over time.
Over time, yeah, I would say.
Like Aang, lightning bolt through the chest, because I don't want to have spoilers for people. Yeah, I mean it's torso. It goes through him. That's all that matters. Yeah, but that like his the way he deals with it over time is a big part of his character growth. But anyways, we've lost the steam.
Just reinstall it. Like
it's lost.
Well, okay, here's we'll lead out with this interesting bit of trivia. What is a villain of the week show that you think is underappreciated?
Okay.
A villain of the week show that you've seen that you think is underappreciated.
Symbiotic Titan.
That's the one you're gonna pick, really?
It's super underappreciated. Because it only
I'm really surprised you didn't pick SWAT Cats. Based on how much you were talking about it earlier.
I just love Megasex LR. So I guess space. And SWAT Cats was just an old version of that show. So
I think, like, normally I would say Batman Beyond, but I feel like that's picking up more steam with them talking more and more about making a live action Batman Beyond movie.
mhm.
And I want to say Samurai Jack, but that's also like pretty popular.
Yeah, I think Samurai Jack is appreciated.
It's appreciated like enough for like it being Samurai Jack, I would say.
People should watch it, but those who have enjoyed it.
Obviously, like nothing like, you know, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Angel or Buffy the Vampire Slayer that are like these huge like shows. I think I don't know, I keep wanting to bring this up, but I think the Powerpuff Girls, like, while they had like a rogues gallery of people that they always fought, like they were always fighting Mojo Jojo or like him or whatever, like they had like recurring villains. There were lots of episodes where it was just like a random like whatever like monster.
Yeah,
Mostly it was like Mojo Jojo like turned this like seemingly whatever problem like into a crazy monster.
yeah.
But I think it's underappreciated because people were like, "Oh, Powerpuff Girls is cool, like whatever, like sure." But every episode like had an important like sort of life lesson that you could take. I'm not gonna say every episode, it's a general statement, of course, but like a lot of episodes had like important like life lessons that you like you don't think about like, oh, I learned this from Powerpuff Girls, but like
A moral of the story.
right. There was always like a moral of the story, and like it you could apply it to your daily life, kind of. Or like you could apply it in your life.
The mayor of town, every single life lesson always just went completely over his head. Not short joke, but like
Well, no, and that's actually a good point. Is like that's how they point out the moral of the story, and that was how they always pointed out the moral of the story. The Powerpuff Girls would talk to the mayor at the end, and they'd be like, "Oh, we did, you know, whatever this thing, and we like learned about this thing," and he's like, "Oh," and he would make a joke, and like the Powerpuff Girls would all be like, Mayor, you're an idiot."
close in on his face.
I mean, yeah. I think it's underappreciated in that way. Like it's appreciated for being, you know, like one of Cartoon Network's like the Powerpuff Girls, like, but it's underappreciated in like what it could teach you.
Okay.
Thus the shirt that our friend used to wear in high school. Everything I need to know about life I learned in kindergarten, and had a picture of the Powerpuff Girls on it.
I don't remember that shirt at all.
I do. And maybe that's just because I remember weird details, and I'm weird. I mean, that's not up for debate. Like, that's just like a fact of life. That's just like, you have to get over it.
All right.
So, villain of the week, freak of the week, monster of the week shows. What's your favorite? Let us know, and we will acknowledge you by reading it and being like, yeah, okay. And we will see you guys next time, maybe live on the
Maybe
Dr. Z
dead.
show.
Adios.